Yep.
Thank you. Second, next month, office. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, I'll take on to the elected chairman. Congratulations, I with you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to the press and welcome to the public. Right, could we have the election of Vice Chairman, please? Could we have a proposal?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Sims.
Thank you. Second that. All those in favour? Right, Steve? Right. We have a slight problem. Oh, declarations of interest first, sorry. Anybody got any declarations of interest? No. The minutes of the previous meeting?
I'm happy to propose them as a true record.
Right, could I have a seconder, please? Right, all those in favour? Thank you. Urgent items, none. We have a slight problem because we don't have Simon Mansell on the screen. So we can consider the GDPR papers and we can make any questions or comments for him and he will reply to us within 24 hours. Is that right, Bob?
That's correct, Chairman.
So I don't, or else it can be deferred, but if it's deferred, it'll be deferred till November, which is a long time to wait, I think. So would people like to discuss it? Right, okay. Right, I'd just like to make a comment first, if I may. Questions for Simon, that not all the services are actually in the table. And I don't know whether it's still unfinished. And also, I think it would help members if they were grouped under business units, so we could perhaps understand it a bit better. And I did want to know what the yellow bits were on the bits of paper and the toolkit, is it? Yeah. And I imagine the toolkit is probably Cornwall's toolkit, and has it been adjusted for us? But it was also made in 2018-19, so does this have to be updated? Seems strange we can't get any answers, doesn't it? But that's my questions at the moment. Has anybody got any more questions? Bob, could you answer any of those? Or?
Well, I can answer in part, I think. Chairman, thank you. I've had some correspondence with Mr. Mansell about this in terms of the service areas. Some of them do not actually hold, some services don't hold personal information. So that would be one reason why not all services are represented. The other is that he hasn't heard back from all the services that he's made inquiries of. So that is the only kind of part response I could provide at this time on behalf of Mr. Mansell.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Sims.
Essentially, I mean, I must confess I haven't read every word in it, but I have read a lot of it, and it does strike me that essentially it's applying national legislation in the way that we see fit, and we haven't got a great deal of options either way. We have to do something, and I didn't see anything with any particular issues in it. It's something we've got to do, and essentially we've got to get on with it. And I don't think we should be, certainly don't think we should be hanging around until November to do it.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a brief point, really. I remember years ago when one of my roles was Data Protection Officer for the council, and we had an inspection by the Audit Commission, and all our education records were on paper, and so they were exempt in those days. But this is obviously a huge move forward from those early days of data protection. It must have been 15, probably 20 years ago. And paper copies were not part of the Data Protection Act. Now they are. I'm glad to see that as well. And it's incorporated within this compliance report. I thought it was an excellent piece of paper, actually.
Okay.
Madam Chair, for me, I draw your attention to paragraph 24 and 25. Paragraph 24 and 25. Perhaps a resolution to note the report, particularly those paragraphs, and slight typo there to call for a, because it's quite a positive message, although there's further work to be done, and call for that report in March next year, and that would probably deal with it adequately for the moment.
Okay.
May I ask a question of Mark? I mean, I think you're more likely to know this than anybody else in the room there. You may not know. How far up the road are most local authorities with this? Because it's been quite an onerous burden for a lot of, I can't imagine that for 1 minute everybody's there yet.
No, they're certainly not. And I think a challenge that, it's a challenge for all authorities, but it's a particular challenge for large authorities which might not know what they know, and tracking down all the different bits and what have you. So each individual element is not that difficult, but there's a lot of elements to track down. So it's a long and involved process.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, likewise, I think I was pretty encouraged by this report, really. I thought it was very good, and the whole process, you know, GDPR is something you've got to be really serious about, all organisations, and I think it's fair to say some are a lot more serious about it than others, and I'm pleased to see we're in the serious camp. I was just going to ask the question on paragraph 24 about where are we on the progress, but, you know, it seems like a lot has been done. Just a couple of questions really about how well it's been received by staff. Is it, you know, because it is a cultural thing, we've got to, you know, it's a bit of a change of culture. And also sort of with regards paragraph 21, what are the costs involved? Are there any direct costs? This is taking a lot of time just to get a feel for that really. Maybe Chief Exec would have a handle on that.
Thank you, Chair. Not a precise one, no. But the impact is time. Yeah, and everyone's busy, and so it's very easy with the more immediate pressures of other things to put this on the back burner and miss something. So time is the issue, yes.
And in terms of how it's been received by staff?
In principle and the objectives very well.
Yeah, fine. Okay. And I guess the ultimate question I think we as members need to know is: are there any threats of any data breaches, non-compliance with GDPR, or is it looking fairly tight? Because that's ultimately where we're trying to get to, I think.
My understanding is at the moment it's a reasonably good position. Certainly you're right about an organisation taking it seriously. The two things are, there are some areas we need to delve into a bit deeper, as are set out in 24, and it's not a one-off. We have to keep looking, even in areas that are fine at the moment. We need to keep regularly looking to make sure they don't slip, which can happen very easily.
Thank you.
Any more questions? So, do we make a recommendation now then for the are we proceed with that? The members consider the contents of the report and its associated appendices.
I think a simple noting would do. So 1 becomes note the report and 2 is as written.
keep this as that?
Yeah.
To come back to committee, to scrutiny?
Yes.
Okay, could I have a proposal, please, for the recommendations to committee? Thank you, councillor Hart. Do the two together? Okay, right. All those in favour? Thank you very much.
And may I just ask a question, just regarding the first recommendation, just in a general sense, members consider the contents of the report and its associated appendices. But I don't even think that's a recommendation, isn't it? You have to look at it. So you have considered it de facto. And if you, for some reason, we vote that down, we've all been in breach because we've looked at it. It just seems as we get that quite a lot of members consider the contents of the report, and I think it's a fairly silly thing to put as a recommendation, given that you've had to have looked at it first.
Or we note the report.
Yeah, note is much better.
That's what we've done. Right, we go on to, now, agenda item 7 and 8. We haven't got Robin, have we?
Chairman.
No.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes, certainly, Bob.
Received some, similar to the information from Mr. Mansell from Mr. Pritchard. He is happy, in terms of the audit plan, he is happy for members to take the item and approve, if that's what they wish to do. He will take any comments and they will be included in a revised draft. On the annual report, again, he is content, although despite the issues with the technology, that he doesn't need to present the report if members are happy with it.
Right, members, are you happy with these, with the, is he available on the phone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worked very well.
No. We could call a special meeting for these two. See. Number 7.
Chairman, if I give Mr. Pritchard a quick call,
Yeah.
we can have a quick discussion maybe on the audit plan.
Okay. So we do number 8 first. Got number 8. Do the number 9. So we're going to do agenda number 8. All right. Right. Does anybody have any comments? Councillor Watt?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just one brief comment, and I've got a feeling I know what the answer is, but I'd just like it confirmed. On the, which page is it? Page 10. The top of the page is Park House, so that will give you an idea. 5th one down, I think, is the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority. It's the only area in the audit that hasn't got any ticks in any of the boxes. Now, I wondered why, and now I've been thinking about this. It says completion of a small body's annual internal audit report. And I've got a feeling that regulation has been withdrawn. I think it's now been accepted within, instead of 2 audit reports, because we always had to have 2 and pay for it. It's ridiculous to the IFCA. I've got a feeling it's only 1 now. I've got a feeling that one the burden of that one was taken away, which is possibly why there are no ticks, but I don't know.
I don't know.
That's only my assumption.
It's unfortunate. I don't know the answer either. It's a very good question.
Bob, do you know the answer?
Can I take that away and get a written answer?
Yes, I think we'll have to have written answers. We can't get through to Robin, so.
I think perhaps one thing that might help, Chair, if I may, forgive my interrupting, is there anything in this list that members think doesn't need doing? And is there anything not in this list that members do think needs doing?
Right. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just had a question whether the internal audit covers the effectiveness of the inter-authority agreement. Because obviously that's a significant part of our services and budget, so.
It could be an item, yes.
Well, I would suggest it should do, because obviously there's considerable financial and legal services amongst other things, and IT, of course. So that would seem to make sense to me.
Well,
Yes, from the audit plan for this year, there's an allocation of 5 days for corporate governance. So if it fit in somewhere, it would fit in there as a dedicated authority, committees and other frameworks and control.
Why don't we, sorry, I do forgive me for interrupting, Chairman.
no, you carry on.
Why don't we note that, minute that as under the second recommendation to you today, that members provide such comments as they consider appropriate, whereas record it as a comment, ask for a written response to the comment, and both will then go to council.
Okay. Anything else, anyone?
No, I don't.
Councillor Smith.
No, but otherwise I thought it looked fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I don't
Councillor Sims.
above and beyond what Jonathan said, I'm going to need to add to that. I don't think there's a great deal of mileage in continuing with this one within the absence of Robbie.
No. No. So do we want to take the recommendations? Members accept the internal audit plan 2019-20, 21-22 as appropriate with regard to the objectives and needs of the council. That members provide such comments as they consider appropriate, which we'll put that in about the collaboration. Like to have a proposal, please? Councillor Watt? Councillor Smith, all those in favour? Thank you. Right. No, well, we go back to agenda. We can't really do agenda item 7 because unless we're doing the same thing, we ask if you've got any questions, we can put them through. Bob, would that be okay to do? Should we do this one? And do it the same way that members provide such comments, or?
I think that would be very helpful. The first thing is, if we look at recommendation 1 to committee, members have read the report. Is there anything that members are, to put it colloquially, worried about that isn't there at all? Or actually, and this is the question that's being asked, is there anything there where the level of assurance given by what's being said isn't sufficient for you, and you'd like to ask probably the officers to come back and give you a bit more assurance in that area? I mean, of course, some of the things that it may be making comments that are less than total assurance about will be ones you already know, which is why they're on other agendas and other reports and you're looking at them.
I've just got one, I've got one query here because on page 38, he's got risk management as adequate and effective. And I just wanted a bit of clarity on that, really, because how has he come to that conclusion when we're just doing a risk management now? So, and I just wonder.
I think if it's a help, it's a good question. It's the exact opposite of any question I've ever heard asked of an auditor, which is, why are you saying something too nice? I suspect that it's because they've looked at the areas where there's a statutory responsibility. So, for example, children's services,
Right.
to have very specific risk management, and it is there.
Yes.
It's my suspicion.
But it would be good to have that, have a bit of clarity on that. That would be one of my questions. please. Has anybody else got any questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Sims.
Well, I think quite a lot of these significant findings, whilst I don't think they're overly critical, they are pointing out levels of
39.
39. I mean, like active city, improved marketing, various, just useful pointers really, perhaps not overly critical, as I said, but it's quite a useful list, and it would have been nice to actually get something more specific really than just a paragraph. So I think I just don't want us to sort of wave it through in the absence of Robin, and then it just disappears into the wild blue yonder.
No.
Because there's some quite good stuff in this report.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like Councillor Sims, I agree. It does need more detail. It felt like, to me, the report was a bit short, which it usually isn't. And it's usually a very interesting, good process. And I really sort of rate the process as a good thing for the council. A couple of specific questions. There were a couple of red flags raised on operational services and procurement. So I just wanted a bit of expansion on those, really. On page 36, there's a couple of red flags raised, and it doesn't really, minor detail, go into detail about what exactly that is.
I got you.
Although I did notice in operational services, there was a critique of staff capability, and I wonder whether that's to do with staffing levels or wasn't quite sure. On page 40, it says property maintenance, operational services capability. I wonder if that's one of the red flags raised.
Oh, yes, page
Don't know if Chief Exec has any. No, okay.
No, I'm sorry, I don't. What you might want to consider doing is two things, and they don't have to be done right now. Well, the first one doesn't have to be done right now, which is to when you put this in this paper copy in the bin later, which I hope you will do so that you have some room in your house, that you pull out the pages that are headed significant findings.
Yeah.
And when we next look at the risk management report, that they're there as things being done. The other thing that you could do, and for some of them, well, all of them, I suppose, but any ones you're particularly interested in, you could do now, because all the officers will just go away and look at their areas that are relevant to them, is you could, as the scrutiny committee, actually build some of this into your work plan and say, we'd like a short report in 6 months' time from, I don't know, whoever, on what it was saying about, what were we just looking at, property maintenance. We'd just like a short report that gives us feedback on the things in that grey box on property maintenance. That would be one way of dealing with ones that particularly interested you.
Yeah, thank you. Just other questions were, well, an interesting observation that the grant claims and procedures, actually that was flagged up by external audit as well as quite a major issue, wasn't it? So it's interesting to see that's crossed and sort of reassuring in a way. Collection of trade refuse. It's something I'm a little bit concerned about. I don't know whether Councillor Sims has any thing to add on that, given it's your also lead. Sorry, we're looking at page 39, council tax and business rates. This has been flagged up before, given it's your lead member for place, whether you had any handle on this.
Yeah, well, this is, it has been discussed before and it's been brought to my attention before. It's it's torturous really, because you have various, certainly there are some buildings over here where there's a number of holiday lets, there's a number of non-holiday lets in it. And I don't think it's really all that possible for the guys who are picking it up to disaggregate it. So one way of doing it is you compare November to July. But it's 4 or 5 months gap, isn't there? So then, perhaps there's some systems can be put in place with that. But inevitably, because of the nature of the beast, some people will inevitably abuse it at some point. And what you need to do is to reduce that as much as possible. But if you're too draconian with it,
Just wonder whether it's worthy of some more attention.
Well, I have spoken to Helen about this, not about 3-4 weeks ago, and they are still applying themselves to try and resolve it. But it's quite a fraught issue, really, and it's a difficult one to do. And it's not really something you want to put onto the backs of the guys picking up the rubbish, because they, frankly, got enough to do. Yeah, I mean, they're hot and bothered enough at the moment without having angry residents saying, well, that's not commercial, etc. So you take my point, really. It's fraught, but there may well be ways to improve the situation over as time goes forward.
And then just also perhaps a comment on the health and safety issues. And I mean, this does also tie into risk management, of course, and maybe just a comment from the Chief Exec about this kind of state of play on this, because this has been a bit of a shift in the organisation recently, I think.
Yes, we've made the appropriate decisions and issued the appropriate instructions to shift the responsibility to the relevant operational managers. Now it's a question of quietly reinforcing that to get the cultural change to make it effective. Yeah.
Maybe, I guess it'll be dealt with in internal audit again, but something we should just be mindful of perhaps in scrutiny about the health and safety issues, I think, to, put that on the work plan for discussion at a later date, perhaps.
Okay.
I was gonna,
Could propose that later on.
Coming up at the end, so we could
well, no, I mean,
discuss that.
during my, I don't know, 6 years on the council now, it seems like 60, but there has been, things have got better on health and safety. People have taken it more seriously as time's gone on. I don't think once upon a time anybody took it seriously at all, but things are improving, but there's always somebody go. But in a way it relates to what Mark said earlier on. It's a job that needs doing, but it doesn't need to do as the job that needs to be done now. So, there's always a risk of it going on the back burner. So perhaps there should be one officer with an overarching responsibility to make sure people are being compliant, or improving at least.
Okay. So do we take the recommendations, Bob, now? Can we do that? Can we take the recommendations? Yes, right. Recommendation 1, recommendations to council, that council considers key points raised in the annual report 2018-19 in the context of risk and performance management, with reference to the audit plan where appropriate. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Sims. Thank you. All those in favour? And recommendations to committee.
Sorry, Chair, just a question. Do we need an extra recommendation here to get feedback from Robin Pritchard?
Well, I think that members provide such comments as they consider appropriate, and
But then an action to
then an action
get the
to
answers.
get the answers to the questions that we've asked. Bob?
Yes, and then that recommendation council to include that.
The one
So how do we word that?
Responsive or responsive.
Members provide such
In-
comments and consider.
within a month.
Oh, within less than a month.
Less than a month, I think. Do you want some wording for that, Andy? For that recommendation? Bob, how are we going to word it?
I think probably it would be an amendment subject to the written responses from the internal audit.
You got that, Andy?
And because the internal audit is ongoing on the July, it will be in the next few years.
By the 12th of July?
Okay.
Right, could I have a proposer and seconder for those?
Do we need, just a thought, do we need to put anything regarding the significant findings? I think everybody agreed that the significant findings are quite a useful works improvement plan, if you like.
Yeah.
So it might be worth just giving them with special emphasis.
But that doesn't go in the recommendations, does it?
I don't know if it could go into recommendations.
No.
I mean, that struck me as the most useful part of the report, and
Yeah.
it's not really part of the recommendations.
I think it'll probably come under the key points raised in the annual report, which is significant information.
Okay, that's fine.
Could I have a proposer, please, for the two recommendations? Thank you. Seconder, please. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Right, agenda item number 9, the risk management. I'd like to ask Bob to present this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just get to the right page.
Yeah, it's all a bit higgly-piggly here. Here we are.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll take the report as read. This is obviously a piece of work that was given the instruction from the interim chief executive. It's an area where there was a considerable amount of work done about 3 years ago, but since then, at the corporate level at least, there seems to be some degree of lapse and a lack of consistency. So what this report is doing is presenting to the committee some information for their consideration to inform a report to full council at the July meeting of council. And this has included a revised risk management policy, but also the progress that's been made in developing a corporate risk management framework and reporting schedule to be endorsed by council. So this doesn't take into account necessarily those specific areas where there's statutory requirements to have the risk registers that the interim chief executive referred to, say around children's services and the internal audit annual report. But these are referred to within the report because although at the corporate level there's been something of a lapse for the past 3 years, there has obviously been a lot of work going on in the different business units for the risk registers that are required to hold. So I'll pick it up. One other point, when I had a briefing with the chairman yesterday, it was noted that in Appendix B, which is on, and the risk number IP10, which is on page 48, there's specific reference to damage relating to the museum and the town hall and negative impact to tenants and the community. This, and it's pointed out that the scores were probably incorrect, and that's certainly true. The inherent risk scores far lower than they should be. Actually, where this should have gone to, this is an illustration that this is a work in progress, is under Appendix C on, what I think is page 51. There's a reportable risk, IPO1, around the council's buildings or other physical assets do not meet the required standards. So it probably is a risk that was incorrectly identified at the time in relation to IP10 on Appendix B, because if we did that for these buildings, those buildings, we would have to do the same risks for all the other buildings. And it then kind of gets into that kind of messy area which this process is trying to avoid by having a very clearly identified set of reportable risks at a high level for council. So I just wanted to bring that to members' attention and thank the chair for pointing it out.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much. If I may, Chair. Firstly, to say, so that last point that's being made is those buildings, along with others, are encompassed within IP01 in the residual risk register. That is the one that you will now regularly look at. So a few points, if I may, Chair. First of all, just to say about Appendix B, that this is just for background information so that you know what the council has to, again, to put matters very simply, worry about, but is working on and has worked on adequately. But you just need to be assured over time that it's still doing it and that these risks don't come back again. The one to focus on, and the one that you'll receive periodic updates on, is Appendix C. And so that's the one to focus on. So we'll come back to that in a minute. My suggestion, and it's only a suggestion, Chair, is that you can divide your debate now, before you move to the resolutions, you can divide your debate into two parts. The first part would be to turn to page 29 and have a discussion about the policy. Do you like the policy? Is there anything you'd like to change? Having finished that discussion, to then move on to page 51 and Appendix C and ask questions, make comments about the report that it will evolve over time, obviously, but the report that you're going to keep getting. So is it in an appropriate format for you? You're happy with that? Is there anything that's missing that you think should be there? Is there anything where you significantly disagree with the score or with the proposed ameliorative measures, and so on and so forth? So I'd suggest two separate discussions. One on the policy, which you'll see every few years, and then one on Appendix C that you'll see every quarter, I imagine.
Okay, fine. So we'll start with the policy. Has anybody any questions on the policy? Councillor Sims.
Well, we had a workshop on this not too long ago, slightly tetchy one if I recall. And it was, and I don't wish to retread that ground again, and I'm sure if anybody's listening on YouTube, they would absolutely not wish me to retread that ground again. But I thought in the end it was satisfactory, and I was quite happy with what we ended up with. And this was really a refined and reversion of that and reflects it. So I'm actually quite happy with the plan. Now, obviously, it's quite big and it's perhaps a bit beyond embryonic, but it's not completed yet. But I'm happy in terms of direction of travel at the moment with this. So I'm happy to recommend that we approve the revised risk management policy.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very specific question on, the interaction between lead members and senior managers. What's so this is page 37, paragraph 23. Lead members should be regularly updated with regards to the operational risks. Just some thoughts here in terms of sort of how often and what the kind of roles of lead members actually have here.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smith. I think when I'm making reference to the operational risks, these tend to be at the level below the corporate level, so they would be expected to be made aware that there's satisfactory progress in making sure those risks are acceptable, and that they can perhaps feed back to their colleagues in their reports that, yep, there's been, because it's part of the role of the lead member to provide that challenge to the respective senior manager. So that's where I think that mainly was come from. In terms of the corporate risks, those would be these reportable risks that are in Appendix C has been reviewed very regularly at the corporate leadership team, so more frequently than they would be reported to council, for obvious reasons, because they are the most significant corporate risks where our current controls aren't as good as we would like them to be. And I'm sure that the feedback from those discussions as well would be for the reportable risks, corporate risks in that lead member's area of responsibility would also be picked up in those discussions with the relevant senior manager.
Okay. Do the lead member roles and responsibilities need updating then to include this? I haven't actually looked at a copy recently, but I
would have thought it's inherent.
I'm afraid that I can't bring to my mind what's written down at the moment by way of a lead member role. I think the journey we're on with lead members is to focus, I would humbly suggest, is to focus on the word lead. And yes, leadership involves challenge, but challenge isn't leadership. So the ultimate position I think we're aiming for is that and this sits alongside the service plans, which we'll be talking about in a very short while, and the highlights of the corporate plan in our vision for the islands, which we'll be talking about on the 25th, and of course the corporate plan. And it sits alongside performance reporting. This will inform performance reporting. If it's an important issue here, it should be reported on, broadly speaking. And I think the ultimate position is when there's a performance management report on an area of the lead member speaks to it. And the lead member takes a role then in as well, because of course they know what's happening and they know what needs to be done, that they go and work with other lead members that are relevant to achieve something, but very simply, lobby for money. I glanced in a particular direction. And they go and coordinate with lead members outside the council, so partners, Cornwall Council, relevant members, etc., etc. So we get the benefit of the knowledge, skill, and most importantly, political weight of lead members that officers don't have.
Yeah, not against that idea in principle, but I think it needs a little bit further discussion, I think, to develop that really. Just an overall question really around the risk management strategy, which I think, I welcome it as a piece of work, certainly. What's the mechanism for monitoring targets? And are there any sort of, let's say, any sort of punitive measures if targets aren't met? How does this work? Is there some sort of enforcement procedure, oversight?
I'll just kick off and then Bob will tell you where I went wrong. For all members, for most of the time, the key reporting mechanism and monitoring mechanism is Appendix C. So it's keep the last copy, and when you get the next one, see has it gone from, and expect an explanation of has it gone from green to red or red to green, and so on and so forth. Have the things that should have been done, what's emerged, etc. So it's Appendix C, but it also flows over into the service plans and performance reporting on the service plans. Because much of the if we look at the first page of Appendix C, and we look at residual risk, and we look at the boxes to the right that say things need to be done, those things will be appearing in team and departmental service plans with dates and targets and the costs and everything. And so when in a less formal way the lead member, and in a more formal way the council itself and Scrutiny are monitoring the service plans, you should be able to cross-reference to this and see progress there on the things written here.
So essentially that's senior managers taking the day-to-day overall oversight, and then it should be referred back to members for scrutinising, or scrutiny committee, is that the route where it's coming?
Well, I think here we have, and every council does, have a bit of a dilemma, which is, first of all, at no level is there sufficient member time to look at all of it, because there are literally hundreds of these. So that's why we need, for risk, narrowly looked at as risk, we need Appendix C that reduces it to a manageable level for members. And similarly, in terms of the service plans, we've got the team plans with myriads of objectives and what have you. And then we've got the departmental plans with the key ones, which will cross-relate to this, cross-relate to the corporate plan, etc. So there needs to be a regular monitoring of performance on the departmental service plans by the relevant committee. Well, we haven't got the relevant committee, so it's by council. Unless council decides that is an additional function for overview and scrutiny to perform. What you'd expect overview and scrutiny to do is to use this as one of the sources for their annual work plan and say in the next year, we'll look at that one and explore it in a bit more detail, but not to regularly monitor all of it.
I would completely endorse what the interim chief executive said, in terms of, Appendix C is the key thing. I think where it won't be reported in isolation of just a particular quarter, because obviously members will be kept in touch with what the trend is in where we're going with risks, and the risk make software that we have provides for that. I'm getting to grips with that. What it also has the potential to do is to not just include risk, but also you can populate it with potentially performance information or corporate plan information, so you would get systematically the same reports that would then become very familiar with councillors to read and understand. The trick between relating in between the different things is possibly a game of 3D chess that might be beyond risk-mate, and we will have to come up with some kind of clever solution ourselves. But I'm sure we'll be able to do that. But yeah. The other thing about the policy template we use does have a breaches and non-compliance section, but I couldn't find a way of populating it for this policy because of the nature of how it's going towards members and things, so that the breach thing was taken out, but it was considered.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, jumping back about 20 minutes. Regarding the member updates, yes, you do get risks in them, but not in a formal sense. I mean, you find out what's going on. If there's issues which are risks, then you will be told about them. It's not a formal setting. There's an inherent issue, though, to challenge somebody on something when the information you're challenging them on is coming from them. Now, that's not necessarily a brilliant way of challenging it. So I think it does depend on the relationship between the lead member and the officer to an extent. You know, so, and I should have had an update today, but it's been postponed, so I've been much fresher in my mind what the issues are, but it's tomorrow now instead. So yeah, you definitely get the risk, but if it's everything, the things that are flowing along quite well, you don't really discuss that much. But if there's issues, then that's the point of the discussion, really.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I completely accept that. I just think maybe in terms of our renewed risk management policy that it'd be worth revisiting lead member roles to reflect that, so it's formalised.
Yeah, but the lead member updates don't necessarily that formal. I can understand that in a more abstract sense, but in terms of the lead member updates, they're not necessarily that type of rigid checklist.
Just to say that, and looking forward to your workshop on Monday, what we're trying to do is to bring forward a whole load of paperwork that we were getting ready for the 25th to Monday and get it out to you tomorrow evening, okay? Because I knew you'd be bored over the weekend. Amidst that will be a bit of a hodgepodge of service plans. Because you start off, and we are starting off, you start off by doing the team service plan. So every team has a plan of objectives, costs, dates, etc. All of that. You do that first, and then you select from all of those a number of lines. So you don't summarize, you select a number of lines that for that department are particularly important. And one of the things that will make them important is they relate to this. Another would be that they relate to something else in the corporate plan or whatever. So you select the important ones and they become the departmental service plans. So they're not abridged, they're just a selection of key. And they get approved annually by members, and they are the basis of accountability by members. In the sense members will see them periodically, or the performance reporting will be based on them, so they can hold people to account, etc., for delivering them. And so And of course, like everything else, it's all interrelated. So it sits together with financial management reporting, risk management reporting, performance management reporting, corporate plan, and so on. And so this might be a useful little discussion on Monday. This might naturally emerge as something to talk about. Certainly something we need over the next quarter to start to develop and get used to, and our best way to do it, given our particular circumstances and structure.
Yeah, I agree. And just also with regards in the reporting mechanism to full council, what are we looking at here? I feel like we need to sort of formalise that reporting mechanism so members have that oversight.
In terms of risk management, it's
Yes.
Appendix C.
Yeah. How often?
Quarterly.
So that will happen. Right, sorry, yes. Be clear.
The full council.
Yep.
Yes, so quarterly is outlined in the report and recommended that an
Annual to
to
scrutiny,
scrutiny
isn't it?
alongside the capital strategy refresh.
Any more questions? Yes, the next, yeah, no more questions on policy.
No, just a comment, actually. There's quite a bit of cross-references, which somebody mentioned about half an hour ago, I think. And I've gone through Appendix B in particular. The 10 of those lines of identified risks are all in the annual report of the IFCA, which goes to DEFRA as a legal requirement. So there is a cross-reference, and they are reviewed annually by the committee.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Right, and so now we'll go on to Appendix C. Oh, sorry.
Just on the policy, you've mentioned, you passed on some information from Councillor Marcus. Who sent us.
Oh, yes, yes, I did.
Some of it is very common sense comments regarding internal consistency within the policy, and I'll adopt those. The weakness that he feels there is around the roles and responsibilities of the senior information risk officer in relation to risk IPO3 on page 54 of the report. But I've noted his comments in relation to that, so that's pertinent to the next part of the discussion.
Okay. Right, yeah. Right, Appendix C. Any questions? Bob?
I just wanted to, with something we went through at the workshop, was just to confirm that members are comfortable with the process by which these reportable risks have been identified from that long list of risks considered in Appendix B, the background paper.
I just wanted to make the point, which again was made in the workshop. The inherent risk score is universally abysmal. And I believe that is because that is if you do absolutely nothing, which obviously it would be poor. But I just think it's worth perhaps making that point because if people aren't aware, they think, well, what's going on? Because inherent risk doesn't really necessarily mean that. Certainly didn't mean that to me when I first looked at this thing before the workshop. So the residual risk is far more important, and obviously the target risk is the ambition.
Any questions, Bob?
Just to follow up, yes, the report on I think page 20, paragraph 13 mentions exactly what Councillor Sims is referring to around inherent risk. It's not a straightforward thing because it's simply not real life, but it's the starting point.
Right.
Like, don't eat, you'll die.
Any questions? No? No? No?
No.
Right.
So page 17.
Yes, recommend page 17. We'll get there, go back again now. Here we are. Right, so we've got 2 recommendations for council. Members approved the revised risk management policy incorporating the amendments proposed by the Scrutiny Committee.
These are your ones.
Yes.
That's
So
the
what we
council.
Yeah, that's the recommendations to council.
Yeah, but these are the recommendations to you.
Okay, do you want me to do those first?
Well, only them.
Oh, only them, not the recommendations to council?
No.
Recommendations for the committee. Members consider the draft risk management policy as provided at Appendix A of this report and make such amendments as they see fit for recommending to council. Number 2, that members note progress regarding development of a corporate risk management framework and the proposed reporting schedule and recommend endorsement by council. Could I have a proposer, please, for both? Thank you. Seconder? All those in favour? Thank you. So why aren't we going to take those?
Because that's for council.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I'm slightly confused on it though. I mean, so we're making recommendations to council via 1B and 2B, and then 1A and 2A is what council should do. But surely the Scrutiny Committee makes recommendations to council to do precisely what 1 and 2 is.
Let's not worry about. I am a pedantic lawyer, but let me get carried away. Officers have to write recommendations to council. There they are.
Right.
The recommendations to committee invite you to make your recommendations to council. If you wanted to do something different, then under your one, this thing here, you'd say, we recommend you change this, or we recommend you don't do that.
Right, okay. It's slightly more than the semantics, which I just felt it was. Okay.
It's arguable, actually. It'd be more helpful to put it the other way around, because you go first, but you're second. You should be above there, but it doesn't matter.
Okay. No. Nothing more you want to say, Paul? No? Nothing? No. Go to agenda item 10. The work plan, Scrutiny's work plan. Gosh, which one's that in now? It's in the original, isn't it? Is it in this one? Yeah. Got it. Would you like to present this, Bob? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a standing agenda item at each meeting of the committee. There's a short covering report and then a copy of the work plan as well as when published. There's a few points on page 58 as part of the cover report. Some of the explanations where there's been changes in the work plan. The one that's most recently been subject to further change is that the protocol for member officer relations will now not be presented to both council on 25th of July, and there'll be further consideration by officers at the meeting in August to work out what the process is best going to be for that. So that's a change there. Otherwise, I'll take the paper as read and happy to respond to questions.
Any questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as raised earlier, we should be looking at the health and safety aspects, scrutinising those in terms of policy implementation, etc.
That can be added in, and then there's the alternative approach to potentially incorporate that into performance management reporting to council. Because it's something, again, we haven't been raised at a corporate and consistent level. And then there's the environmental health team working with our services to make sure that risk assessments are up to date and in place. So that in itself could be a performance measure that will give assurance, potentially. But alternatively, it can be work plan for scrutiny.
Sorry, Chair, if I may,
Yes.
if it's anyhow, I think it's sufficiently different to warrant a line of its own.
Yeah, but just really a comment, as I quite often make in these things, resource, and this is an ongoing issue about lack of resource for scrutiny. It needs looking at, as always, not just resource, but engagement.
But I'm happy to propose the work plan, the recommendation.
Have a seconder, please. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Part 2 for information only, so I close the meeting at 7:06.
There was one tangential matter to this that is not a public matter, that if members had a couple of minutes to stay behind.
Okay.